Hello children, welcome back to our English class today. I am A. Madhubabu working at JP High School, Kasibuga. In the previous class, we learned about This is Jodi's Fawn Part 1, and in today's class, we are going to learn This is Jodi's Fawn Part 2 and 3. And now let's look at the overview of This is Jodi's Fawn Part 2. Well, here is the overview of the lesson. This is Jodi's Fawn Part 2, working with text, working with the language, speaking and writing. Now let's look at the objectives of this lesson. Learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify how Jodi finds fawn with the help of Millville, describe pet animals, develop compassion towards animals, improve persuasion skills, explain the importance of nature, identify transitive and intransitive verbs, change the questions from direct speech to reported speech. Before we begin the lesson, let's recap what we have learned in the first video. Well, children, in the previous class, we learned that Jodi's father has been bitten by a rattlesnake, so he quickly kills a doe and uses its heart and liver to draw out the poison. Jodi wonders what would happen to the little fawn left without a mother. So he convinces his father and mother to go to the forest and find the fawn. He takes the help of Millville and goes to the forest. Now let's read and understand how Jodi finds the fawn and how he brings up the fawn to home and he takes care of the fawn. Now let's read and understand the passage Jodi's Fawn Part 2. Jodi gave himself over to thoughts of the fawn. They passed the abandoned clearing. He said, cut to the North Millville. It was up here that Pa got bitten by the snake and killed the doe, and I saw the fawn. Suddenly, Jodi was unwilling to have Millville with him. If the fawn was dead or could not be found, he could not have his disappointment seen. And if the fawn was there, the meeting would be so lovely and so secret that he could not endure to share it. Now let's find the meanings for unfamiliar words. Gave himself over to spend all your time and energy doing or feeling something. Abandoned, having been deserted or left. Clearing, an open space in a forest, especially one cleared for cultivation. Endure, here it means handle. Now let's try to understand the passage once again. Jodi engaged himself in thinking about the fawn. They crossed a desert piece of land in the forest. Jodi gave directions as he told Millville to turn towards the north where Penny got bitten by a snake. He had killed the doe and seen the fawn there only. All of a sudden, Jodi became unwilling to be with Melville. He wondered if the fawn was dead or could not be found. He did not want Melville to see his disappointment. On the other hand, if he found the fawn, the union would be so lovely and personal that he could not bring himself to share it. Now let's check how well you have understood. Here is the question for you. Who gave directions to find the fawn? Is it Melville or Jody or Jody's mother or Jody's father? What do you think is the correct answer, children? Yes, it is Jody. Wonderful. Now let's look at the another passage. He said, "It's not far now, but the scrub is very thick for a horse. I can make it on foot. But I'm afraid to leave you, boy. Suppose you got lost or got bitten by the snake too? I'll take care. It might take me a long time to find the fawn. If he has wandered, leave me off right here. All right, but you take it easy now. You know north here and east, there and there, the tall pine makes a bearing. So long, Millville, I am obliged." Now let's look at the meanings for the unfamiliar words. Scrub, small form of a plant. Wander, to roam. Makes a bearing, acts as a compass and helps to identify directions. Oblige, be grateful. Now let's try to understand the passage once again. Jody told Melville that the point where he saw the fawn is not very far now. Jody suggested that he would go on by foot as the scrubs ahead are very thick for a horse. Melville was afraid to leave Jody alone, as what would happen if he got lost or bitten by a snake too. Jody assures him that he will handle it and also that it might take a while for him to find the fawn in case he has wandered further. He told Melville to leave him nearby. Melville follows his directions and advises him to take it easy. Well, now let's see how well you have understood, children. Here is the question for you. Why was Melville afraid to leave Jody alone? He may be lost in the forest. A snake may bite him. He may be lost or bitten by a snake too. Jody is a small child. What do you think is the right answer, children? Yes, your guess is right. He may be lost or bitten by a snake too. Now let's go ahead. He waited for the sound of the hoofs to end, then cut to the right. The sand showed large cat prints, but the big cats killed fresh and they had left the door to the carrion birds. He patted the grass at the place where he had seen the fawn. It didn't seem possible that it was only yesterday. The fawn was not there. He circled the clearing. There was no sound, no sign. The buzzards clacked their wings, impatient to return to their business. He returned to the spot where the fawn had emerged and dropped on all fours, studying the sand for the small hoof prints. The night's rain had washed away all tracks except those of cats and buzzards. Now let's try to understand the passage once again. Jody separated the grass from the place where he saw the fawn the previous day. He could not believe it had just been a day. The fawn was not at that place. Jody searched the abandoned land, but there was no sign and sound of one. On the other hand, The buzzards made sound with their wings out of desperation to resume what they were doing. Jody began looking at the place where the fawn had appeared from and began reading the small hoof prints in the sand, but the rain from last night had washed away all tracks except for cats and buzzards. Well, children, now let's check how well you have understood. How did Jody find the fawn? By using Google Map with the help of his father, or by using binoculars, or by reading the small hoof prints in sand. How, children? How do you think Jody find the fawn? By reading the small hoof prints in the sand. Now let's look at the part 3. Movement directly in front of him startled him so that he tumbled backward. The fawn lifted its face to his. It turned its head with a wide, wandering motion and shook him through with the stare of its liquid eyes. It was quivering. It made no effort to rise or run. Jody could not trust himself to move. He whispered, "It's me." The fawn lifted its nose, scenting him. He reached out one hand and laid it on the soft neck. The touch made him delirious. He moved forward on all fours until he was close beside it. He put his arms around its body. A light convulsion passed over it, but it did not stir. Now let's find the meanings for the unfamiliar words. Startled, feeling or showing sudden shock or alarm. Tumble, having fallen or collapsed. Quivering, trembling or shaking with a slight rapid motion. Delirious, here it's extremely excited. Convulsion, shiver. And now let's try to understand the passage. Jody was shocked after having experienced some movement in front of him and he fell backward. It was the fawn. The fawn lifted his face with a wide and wondering motion to see Jody and stared at him with his liquid eyes that it left Jody shocked. The fawn was shaking with a slight rapid motion. The fawn sat still and made no effort to run. On the other hand, Jody could not move too, but he whispered lightly, "It's me." The fawn sniffled and smelled him. Jody reached out with his hand and laid it on his soft neck. His touch made the fawn excited, and he moved forward in an attempt to be close to Jody. Jody put his arms around the fawn, which made the fawn shiver slightly, but he did not stir, which means he was not afraid but comforted. Now let's check how well you have understood. So here is the question for you. What did Jody whisper when he saw the fawn? "Hi fawn, come dear, stop there, it's me." What did he say, children? "It's me." Wonderful. Now let's go ahead and find what happened. He stroked its sides as gently as though the fawn were a china deer and he might break it. Its skin was very soft. It was sleek and clean and had a sweet scent of grass. He rose slowly and lifted the fawn from the ground. Its legs hung limply. They were surprisingly long, and he had to hoist the fawn as high as possible under his arm. Now let's find out the meanings for the unfamiliar words. China deer, a clay deer that is easily broken. sleek, smooth and shiny, limply, lacking stiffness, hoist, an act of raising or lifting something. Now let's check how well you have understood. Now let's revisit the passage for better understanding. Jody caressed the sides of his body so gently as if it were as fragile as a china deer. The fawn was soft, sleek, and clean, and even possessed a pleasant scent of grass. Jody lifted the fawn from the ground in a way that hung his limbs in the air. The fawn's legs were quite long, so Jody had to hold him as high as possible under his arm. Now let's check how well you have understood. So here is the question for you. What did Jody compare the fawn with? With a doe? With a deer? With a china deer? Or with a dog? Yes, you are correct, children. It's a china deer. Now let's go ahead and find what happened. He was afraid that it might kick and bleed at sight and smell of its mother. He skirted the clearing and pushed his way into the thicket. It was difficult to fight through with his burden. The fawn's legs caught in the bushes, and he could not lift his own with freedom. He tried to shield its race from prickling vines. Its head bobbed with his stride. His heart thumped with the marvel of its acceptance of him. He reached the trail and walked as fast as he could until he came to the intersection with the road home. He stopped to rest and set the fawn down on its dangling legs. It wavered on them. It looked at him and bleated. Now let's find out the meanings for the unfamiliar words. Bleat, the weak, wavering cry made by a sheep, goat, or a calf. Thicket, a dense group of bushes or trees. Vines, climbing or trailing woody stemmed plant related to the grapevine. Stride, walk with long, decisive steps in a specified direction. Dangling, hanging or swinging loosely. Wavered, move in a quivering way, flicker. And now let's try to understand the passage once again. Jody was afraid that the fawn would kick and cry on seeing or smelling his mother. He took him through the clearing and managed to reach a place surrounded by trees and bushes. Unfortunately, the fawn's legs got stuck in the bush and it made it difficult for Jody to move his head independently. He protected him from the sharp vines too, and his heart was filled with astonishment on being accepted by the fawn. Once he reached the trail, he walked as fast as he could till he reached the intersection on the road that led to home. Jody stood there a while to take a few breaths and put the fawn down on his swinging legs. Standing on legs, the fawn flickered, then it looked at Jody and cried. Now let's see how well you have understood, children. So here is the question for you. Find the word used to describe the weak, wavering cry made by a sheep, goat, or calf from the passage. Is it waver, or flicker, or bleat, or thicket? What do you think, children? Yes, it's bleat. Now let's move ahead. He said, enchanted, I'll carry you after I get my breath. He remembered his father saying that a fawn would follow if it had first been carried. He started away slowly. The fawn stayed after him. He came back to it and stroked it and walked away again. It took a few wobbling steps towards him and cried piteously. It was willing to follow him. It belonged to him. It was his own. He was light-headed with his joy. He wanted to fondle it, to run and romp with it, to call it, to come to him. He dared not alarm it. He picked it up and carried it in front of him over his two arms. It seemed to him that he walked without effort. And let's find out the meanings of the words. Enchanted, filled with delight or charmed. Stroked, move one's hand gently over a surface repeatedly, and we call like it's caress. Wobbling, move unsteadily in a particular direction or from one side to the other side. Fondle, stroke or caress lovingly. Light-headed, unable to think clearly. Romp, play. Alarm, frighten. Now let's try to understand the passage once again. Jody filled with delight as he was told the fawn that he would carry it once he had taken a bit of rest. Jody recalled that his father had told him that a fawn will follow you once you have carried it for a bit first. Jody started walking at a slow pace and the fawn looked as he walked further. Jody came back again to caress it and went forward again. This time, the fawn took a few weak steps in Jody's direction as he cried. Although wobbling, Jody was overjoyed by the fact that it was willing to go with him, which made the fawn his own. He was so overjoyed that he could not even think properly and clearly. At that moment, Jody wanted to caress it with all his desire, play with it, and call it forwards him, but he did not want to frighten it. Then he picked the fawn again in his arms and walked effortlessly. Now let's see how well you have understood. So here is the question for you. Where did Jody want to take the fawn first? To his mother's room? To his father's room? To his friend's room? To the zoo? Where do you think he wanted to take first? Yes, to his father's room. Now let's see what happened. Jody called, Pa, look. Penny turned his head. Jody stood beside him. The fawn clutched hard against him. It seemed to Penny that the boy's eyes were as bright as the fawn's. He said, I'm glad you found him. Jody then went to the kitchen. The fawn wobbled after him. A pan of morning's milk stood in kitchen safe. The cream had risen on it. He skimmed the cream into a jug. He poured milk into a small gourd. He held it out to the fawn. It butted it silently, smelling the milk. He saved it precariously from spilling over the floor. It could make nothing of the milk in the gourd. Now let's see. He dipped his fingers in the milk and thrust them into the fawn's soft wet mouth. It sucked greedily. When he withdrew them, it bleated frantically and butted him. He dipped his fingers again, and as the fawn sucked, he lowered them slowly into the milk. The fawn blew and sucked and snorted. It stamped its small hoofs impatiently. As long as he held his fingers below the level of the milk, the fawn was content. It closed its eyes dreamily. It was ecstasy to feel its tongue against his hand. Its small tail flipped back and forth. The last of the milk vanished in a swirl of foam and gurgling. And let's check the meanings for the unfamiliar words here. butted, hit something with the head or horns, ecstasy, an overwhelming feeling of great happiness or joyful excitement, gurgling, making or characterized by a hollow bubbling sound. And let's try to understand the passage well. So Jody dipped his fingers in the milk and put them in its soft, wet mouth. Instantly, with the fawn sucked greedily. He was hungry. That is why, when Jody took his fingers out of its mouth, it cried and hit him with his head. The next time Jody put his fingers in the fawn's mouth, he gently lowered it so as to bring it near the utensil. The fawn became impatient, blew the milk as he sucked it, and made sounds. The fawn was calm till Jody kept his fingers inside the milk and he drank with eyes closed in satisfaction. Jody felt overwhelmed on feeling his tongue against his hand as his small tail moved back and forth. The milk disappeared quickly, forming foam, which was marked by a bubbling sound. And that's how Jody uh, helped the fawn to drink milk, and you know that is quite happy now. How did Jody feed the fawn? With milk bottle, in a bowl, dipping his fingers in the milk, with bread and jam. Yes, by dipping his fingers in the milk and he put them into the fawn's soft red mouth. Very good, children. And now let's move to the next component. Working with language. Look at these sentences. Penny said to Jody, "Will you be back for before dinner?" Penny asked Jody if he would be back before dinner. Now let's see what are the changes and we will see another example. Now let's see what Jody's mother is asking. Will you allow Jody to bring the fawn? See how he is reporting. She asked that if he would allow Jody to bring the fawn. Now let us look at what are the changes we have to make from uh, to change from direct speech to reported speech. Now here is the helpline for you to change yes or no questions from direct speech to reported speech. Let's look at the example. Penny said, "Do you really want it, son?" In reported speech, we change this as Penny asked his son if he really wanted the fawn. Now let's see what are the changes we have made. Number one, said to me should be used as asked me, and inverted commas are replaced with if or whether. Change the question into statement by starting with the subject, and then change the pronouns according to the subject. When you see Penny, it is he, and change the tense. In the direct speech, it is present tense, and now the present tense will be changed into past tense based on the situation. And you have to change the adverbs. So these are the things how we have to change from direct to speech to indirect speech when you are changing a question. Now let's look at some more examples. Well, here are some questions in direct speech. Put them into reported speech. Melville said, "Will he ride back with me?" He said to Melville, "Do you think the fawn is still there?" He asked Melville, "Will you help me find him?" He said, "Was it up here that Pa got bitten by the snake?" So these are all the questions we use in direct speech. Now put them into reported speech. I'm sure you can do it by taking the help of the rules that we have talked earlier. Now, children, look at these two sentences. He tumbled backward. It turned its head. If you look at the first sentence, it has an intransitive verb, and we say that an intransitive verb is a verb without an object. And in the second sentence, it has a transitive verb. That means it has a direct object. Now, we can ask, what did it turn to the second sentence? Then we'll get the response like, you can answer, its head, it turned its head. So when a question is asked with what, if you get the answer, then that is what we call like it has transitive verb. And if there is a subject as a person, and you can ask the question with who. So now let's do some of the sentences. Say whether the verb in each sentence below is transitive or intransitive. Ask yourself a what question about the verb. For some verbs, the object is a person, so ask the question who instead of what. Now let's look at the first sentence. Jody then went to the kitchen. So will you get the response if you ask a question with what? No. So it is intransitive. Again the same. The fawn warbled after him. It is intransitive verb. You found him. So this is transitive. He picked it up. Again it's transitive. You'll get the response with, if you ask a question, what? He dipped his fingers in the milk. This is also transitive. Now here are some more examples for you. Say whether the verb in each sentence below is transitive or intransitive. It bleated frantically and butted him. The fawn sucked his fingers. He lowered his fingers slowly into the milk. It stamped its small hoofs impatiently. He held his fingers below the level of the milk. You discuss with your friends and do whether it is transitive or intransitive, and show to your teachers. So here is one more small interesting task for you to develop your speaking. So here's a question for you. Do you think it's right to kill an animal to save a human life? Give reasons for your answer. You start discussing with your friends and then you give reasons, and I hope you all will take part in this topic. Now here is a small writing task for you children. Imagine you have a new pet that keeps you busy. Write a paragraph describing your pet, the things it does, and the way it makes you feel. Here are some words and phrases that you could use. You can find all these words like frisky, smart, disobedient, loyal, happy, enthusiastic, companion, sharing, friend, rolls in mud, dirt is the bed, naughty, lively, playful, eats up food, hides the newspaper, drinks up milk, runs away when called, floats on the water as if dead. So here are some phrases for you. So what I suggest you is, we have learned how to write a paragraph in the previous class. So now by using these phrases, try to write a small paragraph about a pet animal that you like. So let's check our progress now. Here is the task one. How did Jody bring the fawn back home? Jody was filled with emotion after he found the fawn. Can you find at least 3 words or phrases which show how he felt? How did the deer drink milk from the gourd? Why didn't the fawn follow Jody up the steps as he had thought it would? So these are the questions we may get in the exam. So try to get ready and write the responses and show to your teacher. And the second task is say whether the verb in each sentence below is transitive or intransitive. Ask yourself a what question about the verb. So here are the sentences. The fawn followed him. He walked all day. He stroked its sides. The fawn lifted its nose. Its legs hung limply. Task 3. Here are some questions in direct speech. Put them into reported speech. Melville said, "Will he ride back with me?" He said to Melville, "Do you think the fawn is still there?" He asked Melville, "Will you help me find him?" So hope you can do very well. In This Is Jody's Fawn, Jody's father uses a home remedy for a snake bite. What should a person now do if he or she is bitten by a snake? Are all snakes poisonous? With the help of your teacher and others, find out answers to such questions. Then write a short paragraph on what to do if a snake chooses to bite you.